Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the CX Day Countdown Asia Pacific Online Discussion Panel. This is the first of the many countdown events taking place across the globe as we lead up to CX Day on Tuesday. For the actual events, please visit cxday.org to see the full list of events and celebrations taking place across the globe. Before we start, I'd like to thank our CX Day supporters and sponsors, Medallia, Customerville, NICE, Conformit, Customer Experience Analytics, North Highland, ORC, Verint, Maritz CX, 4C, and InMoment. My name is Anita Siassios, and I'm the Melbourne CXPA Networking Lead, and I also represent Australia on the CXPA International Advisory Board. I'll be facilitating today's session. For those who are new to the CXPA was founded in 2011 and is a non-profit organisation dedicated to the advancement and cultivation of the customer experience profession. The CXPA facilitates effective member-to-member sharing and develops respected standards, offers networking opportunities and promotes the industry to create a better understanding of the discipline of customer experience. There's lots more information available on the CXPA website, cxpa.org, as well as membership details and, as mentioned earlier on, lots of information about our upcoming events. A reminder today that we are using GoToWebinar, and throughout the session you'll have an opportunity to ask questions via the question box, of which the panel will address towards the end. And I strongly encourage lots of questions because we've got a great panel that I'm going to introduce to you right now. So I'm very excited today to have with us a great panel of CX leaders who will share their insights and recommendations on some of the CX trends they are seeing in their geographies and fields. Without further ado, I'd firstly like to introduce Anil Pillai from Pune in India. Welcome, Anil. Anil is the Director of Terragni Consulting, and his expertise lies in helping companies implement people and customer strategy solutions. We have Sai from Melbourne, Australia, founder and principal consultant of CXD Labs, a company that provides a range of CX consulting services. And we also have Tony Hillson from New Zealand, CX Design Director at Service Design Company, specialising in service design. Tony's also part of the CXPA Expert Panel, which is a service that is offered as part of the CXPA membership. So, as mentioned earlier, in this session, our panel members will share with us insights and recommendations on some of the CX trends. And I'd like to start with yourself, Anil. We're continuing to see an increase in research to further understand the effect negative experiences have on customer behaviour. Research is also validating that customers want you to know them well, have their needs met and delivered at a time and way that suits them, leading to emotion and personalisation as strong influences of brand and revenue. Can you share with us your insights on this and what we can proactively do to manage this trend?
Right. Thank you, Anita, and welcome to all the panelists and everybody on the webinar from India. It's early morning here, so we're starting the day with a great event. So thank you for having me over. So coming to your question, Anita, it's a great question. And so what's been happening is that customers are increasingly seeking, as you correctly mentioned, experiences that are very personal to them. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you're having organizations trying to design and deliver these experiences in a very cost-effective manner. So on the one hand, people are saying, hey, I want experiences that are personal. And the other hand, organizations are saying, how do I deliver this experience in a cost-effective manner? Now, when you try and design and deliver personal experience, there are three very important things to remember. One is the context of the experience. What is the context of the experience? So what experience I require probably at the end of the month, if I'm a banking customer, is very different from what I want, perhaps when I'm taking a personal loan with my salary account. So essentially, there's a context for an experience. The other two important elements to my mind are serendipity. I mean, providing these delightful takeaways for the customer where the customer doesn't expect something, right? So it's a very very nice coincidence, and the customer says, hey, this is something that I didn't expect, and I'm completely floored. And the third is empathy. Now, if the common thread between all the three of them, context, serendipity, and empathy, is knowing the customer from an emotional perspective, understanding the customer from an emotional engagement perspective. And that brings us to another very important point, and that is customer experience insights are not like market research insights or insights for product design and so on and so forth. They are basically very personal, very contextual, and are what we call as episodic recall. So therefore, professionals such as in the customer experience field should understand that unearthing experiences, unearthing desires of customers which are personalized for experiences need completely different skill sets than what you have for market research or for VOC program and so on and so forth. And that's really, and that means it means we need to be comfortable with getting emotional insights, we need to get comfortable with getting data insights, and we need to get comfortable with getting qualitative standard insights. And these three put together, the triangulation of these three, or the trifecta of these three, is actually what helps you to design experiences that have a very deep emotional attachment to the customer and have the three elements that I mentioned earlier.
So Anil, can you tell us a little bit about how organisations can actually do that? What kind of tools can they use to be able to get that information?
Absolutely. In fact, there's this whole talk about big data and how big data kind of helps you understand your consumers better. And sure, they do. But I focus on what I call the small data, right? The small things that the consumers kind of interact. So the tools that are out there are, of course, you can use data, and which we do. We use a lot of statistical modeling at both the small data and the big data level. We use non-conscious insight tools. So this is a wonderful tool called the implicit association test, which basically is a great tool to get non-conscious insights from customers. And then, of course, we use a lot of the other inside methodologies like ethnographic research and the standard qualitative depth interviews. But the depth interviews, a small point here, the depth interviews here need to be done by somebody who's trained in eliciting episodic recall. And I make this point again, there's a lot of reading material out there which people can go and read. It's very different from doing depth interviews where you're doing focus groups and you're doing standard depth interviews to elicit reactions, or what we call a semantic data. See, we are actually looking for emotion, we're not looking for semantics. So the tools that are out there should be used keeping this in mind. So you can do qualitative, you can do small data and big data if you wish, of course, and you can use non-conscious tools like the implicit association test.
Any other comments from the other panel members on it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love the three, the context, the empathy, and I just understand the emotion. What we start to find as well is a lot of our clients are more open to the idea of us actually approaching the customers and actually asking them questions. That kind of opens a certain level of vulnerability to some of our clients, but they start to see the reasoning behind why you need to do that. So a lot of qual testing that we do, and when we do get customers come in, it starts to come into the vision of a lot of the senior managers. They start to see that these are the real feedback from customers, and this is what they feel. And you can use tools like emotional wheels just to contextualize what that means for a particular customer. And it really going down to that path of talking to the customer is really a very big thing that we're starting to see in a lot of our clients at the moment.
Let me just
sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Just one comment. I think, Anil, you touched on a really good point when you talked about the likes of the implicit association test, and that I think one thing that's often overlooked is that what's positive is that companies are engaging customers and actually asking them what they want, asking them something. What's being missed is that customers or users are, I think the last research I saw is that customers and users are typically aware of about 15% of their experience. And so, Neil, you touched on that need to get to the implicit piece, the piece that customers, our job is to get to the 85% that customers are unaware of, and build insight from that. And so I think that the implicit needs is really key.
Absolutely. I would like to see more customer experience professionals actually well versed in anthropology, in sociology, and in sciences and the human sciences, as opposed to focusing solely on quantitative and standard methodologies which market research professionals have been using. Experience is a completely different animal, and I think as professionals we need to understand that. And I'd really like to see a lot of movement in the human sciences as opposed to. It's not one or the other, but I'd like to see a larger movement towards the human sciences for experienced professionals, which is something that I think we kind of miss over, or maybe it's not something that is on the agenda at this point in time.
Mm.
So Anil, so just to summarise that, what you're saying is that as a starting point, what we can do is actually start to utilise one of the tools that you've referenced. Could you repeat that again? What was the name of the tool?
Oh, sorry, I was talking on the implicit association test. And I also talked about doing depth interviews using techniques, what are called as episodic recall. So both these tools, I mean, if anybody's interested, I'm be happy to share that with them. There's a lot of stuff out there which social scientists have been researching, for example, at Harvard and at Berkeley and Yale for a long time now on this.
That'll be great. I might actually be able to, I'll include all the links and the references as when we actually provide the video recording of this. Thank you, Anil. I might just move on to Tony. And the reason for that is it's obviously, what we're actually talking about at the moment is that the research, it's evident that the human element will continue to be the core of the design experience. Tony, can you share with us your insights into this and recommendations for our CX professionals?
Yeah, sure, certainly. And I think as you say, we've touched on this with Anil's answer slightly, in that I guess what we're seeing is a growing momentum for organisations to do more market research, or certainly to start projects with some form of research base. And often it may be customer segmentation, sometimes personas, but I think more than often it is market research and potentially quite traditional research. And so I just probably want to talk a little bit around what good practice is in terms of how to ask those questions, and I think the need to actually ask better questions that are going to start to give us better customer experiences. So just sort of touching on 3 or 4 of those, I guess, good practices. If you look at market research, its one aim really is to be representative. It really does boil everybody down to distribution and how much of the bell curve and the normal distribution they represent. And versus customer experience research, which as Anil mentioned, customer experience research is very scenario specific. It's very contextual. It's very specific to the task I'm trying to perform in my life right now. And so the key word there is specific, and sometimes inconvenient for us as designers or people trying to develop mass market solutions that are cost effective. So that's the first piece. I think thinking of design or CX design at a scenario level or task level, looking at some of the research, some of the practices like the jobs to be done framework, is a really useful tool, and the work that they've been doing around good value proposition design is a good book for that as well. So specific to scenario is one difference. The second thing is that organisations are developing this awareness of needing to ask questions, but they're still resorting to focus groups as a way of asking those questions. And so how those questions are being executed has room for improvement, and I think they're still subject to groupthink and biases that come out of focus groups. And again, that point that we mentioned before around typically customers actually are unaware of what they need, and there's a real difference between a customer's expectation and their actual behaviour. So probably that's another point as well, is you really want to be testing based on behaviour. And another point is that we really want to step away from reliance on verbal research and really an over-reliance on what customers say, and start using observational techniques and observing actual behaviour wherever possible. And that's a really key point. My example that I'll give in most presentations is ask somebody how many times you're going to go to the gym this week, and you'll get a certain answer, and then ask them how many times they actually went to the gym. And that's a really easy example to give at an exec session, where most execs are sitting around the table and haven't been to the gym this week, or probably started the week that they would be. It's a really simple example of how behaviour differs from what is socially acceptable or the appearance we want to give socially from actual behaviour. So get into observational and behavioural testing. And the last point I'd give is, and I think the likes of Sai, you're involved in this as well, is really what we're seeing is a move away from asking questions through to creating experiments. Purposefully creating experiments to test behaviour, to test our assumptions about what customers need, and to test our assumptions about our solution. And I think that one other comment I'd make in this area is there is testing happening in other disciplines like user experience and digital design, but that isn't sufficient. That is different from service design or designing an overarching experience and the conceptual design of a service. So I think there's still a lot of room for developing those other disciplines and practices around specifically creating prototypes for services, and particularly in Europe there is a lot more maturity around create service enactments and prototyping of service experiences to get feedback, to get purposeful feedback.
Mm.
So sorry, that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
That's it. Sai, did you want to add something to that, or Anil?
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I love the fact that a lot of the discussions, both from Tony and Anil, is more on the context and specifics of understanding specific emotions, and observational behavioral testing. That is by far one of the most useful tools that we've seen so far. Call jacking, ride-alongs. This is when the people actually experience and put themselves in the shoes of the people that they're designing the experiences for. The amount of qualitative data you can get from just those activities alone surmounts any data mining exercise that you can do. In my personal opinion, it actually puts a face to whoever you're doing it for. So I highly recommend a lot of CX professionals to just actually go out there, paper clipboard, or just walk in the shoes of your customers and see what they do on a day-to-day basis. You learn a lot more than what you would do from data mining.
Mm.
I like the point that Tony brought about experiments. I think it's very, very important. It's a very valid point. I don't think we actually tell clients that the importance of doing experiments and why it needs to be done, because there's always a time and cost element involved. So I think that that's the first thing that you try and do is cut down on anything that's an iterative process when delivering an experience. But I think experiences can't be designed. Sai and me were talking a little earlier. Experiences cannot be designed and delivered in a cookie-cutter manner, like Tony mentioned, context. So the issue is that how do we actually create a scenario, create a framework where experiments are a standard fact of life when it comes to designing experiences, and I think that's a very valid point.
Mm.
Indeed, and I think also I'd just like to add that, and Tony, you've probably got some really great insight into this, is that there are a lot of organisations that are actually inviting their customers to come in and work with them with regards to designing. Can you tell us a bit about that in New Zealand?
Yeah, definitely. Probably a real mixture in that, to Sai's point, I mean, we're certainly starting with going out, getting out of the building and doing the research out where customers are, but certainly bringing customers in during ideation sessions to do some prototyping or to do some service testing. So certainly from that perspective. We do often see a lot of our conversations start actually from customers saying, we want to co-design with customers, and often people see co-design as a real starting point, and they want to be able to execute co-design from day one. And I think the only guidance, and I think it's great to see that appetite. But co-design as a designer or as a facilitator, co-design is quite an advanced kind of skill set. And I think just in terms of people being companies being able to execute co-design from day one. It does have some challenges to be done well, but certainly there is a growing appetite for doing co-design as part of an innovation pipeline or capability. One of the other things actually that is growing in momentum, is that we're just executing 2 projects actually now where instead of doing ideation workshops in the head office, we're literally doing them out in the community, out where customers are, really much in community halls, and that just gives a whole increases the level of engagement so much more.
And just a reminder to our listeners to start typing in some questions if you'd like the panel to answer them. That'll be fantastic. I might move on to yourself, Sai. You've actually done a lot of work in this particular field, but pretty much proactively managing customer expectations and continuing to deliver value, it requires a level of accountability, consistent practices and cadence. And we're starting to see many organisations adapt the agile methodologies. Can you share your insights on how you've seen organisations successfully embed this as a practice, and what are the first steps that we can potentially consider if it's not set up in our own organisations or in our teams as yet?
Yeah, good question. What we start to see is the adoption of Agile, and I think at the very cusp of the start of when that movement started to become more and more common, there was a lot of discussions about the team structure, how to best organize the team to deliver this. And one of the things that we start to see is the role of the CX practitioner in an Agile environment. There's still quite a lot of lessons that we can still learn, and I think it ties in to what Tony and Anil said before. It's understanding that the reason why organizations are going down this particular route is because they really realize that learning quickly and learning frequently is definitely a successful way to deliver something that's of value to the customer. Now the thing is, for CX practitioners themselves, this might not be that easy because things take time, especially when you're doing observational research, going out to a site, multiple sites, going to see clients, and these things do take time. So I think one thing that we're starting to see with a lot of the companies that are trying to build the Agile teams, and also CX practitioners themselves in it, is CX practitioners are looking at all their different skill sets and tailoring it to whatever flavor of Agile that their organizations are deploying. One thing that I've seen done actually relatively successfully is when you're looking at particular sprints for a particular cycle, and you see CX activities such as providing some form of qual research, bringing in customers to do some qualitative analysis, and also looking at early prototype stuff that they can test. So that's the kind of thing that CX practitioners are bringing to a lot of the Agile development teams. And I think one of the things that we start to also see is that a lot of the developers and testers start to link towards what's core value for the customer. So when you're determining the prioritization of your MVP or early testable products, they look to the CX practitioners and go, all right, what do you reckon the customers would do in this instance with our feature that we're about to release? And is this something of value? So the kind of questions that are coming up, it's not as rapid as we would like it to be, I suppose, but it's starting to become more and more prevalent in a lot of our clients at the moment.
Tony, did you want to add anything to that, or Anil?
Yeah, just one point. I think we're working with a client at the moment that's quite a long way through sort of Agile adoption from an IT perspective. And I think it's an interesting story in that we initially engaged with that client roughly 3 years ago and did some internal journey mapping, built a journey mapping model to start to do conceptual experience design, and that project was not supported. There were a lot of restructures went on. Really interesting to look at that as a timeline as they've just re-engaged us now 3 years on and and are a long way through adopting Agile for Enterprise. So they have a number of parallel Scrum teams running and a number of initiatives running. And I think where there's a really nice junction and complement to CX is how we're working with them at the moment, is that CX is really providing now the overarching principles or the overarching conceptual design to start to inform their quarterly roadmaps. So they're really looking at it and saying, well, if we've got 12 Scrum teams, what are the commonalities to this experience? What are the problems that we're solving? What are the customer goals? And what are the overarching, what's our overarching value proposition at each part of the journey that our individual teams now target? So I think there's a really nice sort of synergy there when you think of CX as providing the conceptual design for customer experience and also informing the quarterly plans that those agile teams are starting to design to and starting to implement.
Since we're talking about trends...
Thank you, Tony. We've got a question that's come through. I might just get this question through, guys. So we've got a question from Pooja Shahani. Thank you, Pooja. So we've got here, it's seen that most of the huge companies have their own setup for customer experience. There is a set ideology for their employees to work on, but how would you suggest an individual to contribute in the process of raising the bar?
All right, so do you want me to take that?
Yep.
All right. So essentially, what happens in most organizations, at least in India, what I've noticed is customer experience initiatives tend to be of two types. One is it's either something that the chairman or the managing director says, hey, we want to improve our customer experience, right? So that's one. So the initiative is very, very top down. The other is, it's something that we should be doing because others are doing. So it's a bolt-on. So it's either a bolt-on or it's a top-down. So there is really no organizational DNA that's working towards making the organization customer-centric or and providing greater customer experience. My take and the way I've seen organizations succeed is if you can link customer experience initiatives to business outcomes. And that's one sure shot way of raising the bar, is actually to pick tough business challenges which are customer facing and actually figuring out how can customer experience fix that from a business outcome perspective, because then you get the buy-in of the business team and the budgets available. If it's going to be an esoteric initiative that we should be doing because it sounds good, you cannot raise the bar. If you wish to raise the bar, link it to a business outcome.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like, Anil?
Yeah, so for example, I'll give an example of a bank that we're working with. They came to us and said, we want to do customer experience initiatives, and we said, look, that's not the way we work. Let's figure out what you want to do from a business outcome perspective. So they said, we sat with their team and did a one-day workshop where we said, for their personal loans business, and said, what do you really want to achieve? So they said, we want to achieve a 10% growth in customer acquisition for personal loans. We want to decommoditize our business from every other competitor. Now, this is a business outcome. Now, what can customer experience do to deliver on those outcomes? So we did experiential segmentation, we did the journey maps, and we said, these are the points of differentiation between you and your competitors. This is really how you acquire a completely new customer set that you never looked at before from an experience, because of experience, from an experience perspective. So you actually are now looking at hardcore customer experience initiatives and marrying them to very, very clear business outcomes, which are numbers driven or which are, let's say, outcome driven. And that really energized the entire team. And the management said, this is great. Budgets are not a problem. Just go ahead and do it. And we did it. And we actually finished the project. And then we had a 90-day implementation cycle where we said, let's now marry everything that we've done to the business outcomes. And let's go back to the board and present it and say, this is what we did in the last 90 days from an implementation perspective. And this is the impact on the business. And that really then ensured that everything else from then on, as far as customer experience is concerned, was something that was like, taken, said, yeah, we should just do it. There's no argument on that.
All right, we do have one last question, and I will take that. So, in an agile delivery, how does the role of CX expert differ from the role of a UX expert? And how can you delineate the two roles in the case of both being in the delivery team? Side?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. Everyone asks about the differentiation between UX and CX. I suppose, look, there's two parts to this, right? The thinking and the doing. Now, the thinking element of it is depend on the segment that you're looking at, the focus. For Don Norman had a really interesting quote. He came out with the term user experience because the Apple product at the time had really crappy manuals. The packaging that it came through is not so great. So user experience is actually about the user's experience of the whole gamut, including delivery of the packages. The term customer experience and then the advent of user experience nowadays, if you ask a lot of UXers, they start to think about along the lines of user experience being a far more digital domain. And they go, okay, we do still talk to the customers, we do still do customer interviews, we do qualitative, retrospective, think alouds, all those techniques, they're still being used, but they focus on the digital domain. Now, there's no right or wrong answers in that sense, but this is where CXs can use that as a differentiator between what we do. What we also look at is the other experiences. So you're looking at the service design behind that person unboxing the packaging, for example, the person going into the retail store, for example, how they are communicating with others on social media. So bringing it in the bigger picture of things, one way that I always tell my team, the way you differentiate yourself in the CX, for CX and UX is, although both of you are looking at the same experiences, you are also adding value by putting in the customer's voice outside of the digital realm. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. Again, as I say, the correct term for user experience when it was first originated is actually everything. But it's just the way it is at the moment that it's becoming much more digitally focused. And that's where CX can fill in that gap. Open to the panelists if you have any feedback, because this is a conversation I have almost every week.
Yeah, one maybe metaphor or one way of answering that question is we're talking about service design or customer experience design, talking about how we purposefully design everything in the system, or thinking about systematically and saying we purposefully design everything that a customer interacts with to work together to create value. And I think the term a system is kind of key. We sort of see the lights go on when we use that term. One other thing we often get people to do is to brainstorm all of the things, all of the things that a customer interacts with in their business or for their service organization, and literally get that onto the wall. And if you do that, you very quickly see all the other things that sit around a digital interaction. And then we ask them, what would you like us to design? And I think actually just brainstorming and post-it noting all of those things that a customer might interact with, for us has been a really quick technique to use to get people to see the difference.
Can I just add one little thing? This is a very recent experience where we were in a particular room and there was they were looking at a particular feature, more along the lines of an FAQ feature, and there was a phone number on the top of the app. The customers can go in and actually contact someone. This is where you start to seeing the divergence. So the look and feel, and how the user interacts with the app is definitely within the realm of actually both parties, UX and CX. But the moment they call someone, the script that the customer service professional will use and what they know about the app, that's when the CX domain can come in and assist. So it's the interactions outside of that. And when you ask a UX user experience researcher and go, what happens when the customer picks up the phone, they will turn to the CXer and go, well, what's the experience to continue on delivering value outside of the application? So that's one way you can differentiate.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. That takes us to the end of our webinar. So just to summarize the key CX trends that we've actually been talking about this afternoon, started off with Anil, who really reiterated the highlight of personalization and emotion and the importance of it coming through in the industry. Then we also spoke about the design side of things, and also from yourself, Tony, highlighting the importance of asking the more specific implicit type questions using behavioral type methodologies and tools. And obviously on the agile side of things, yourself aside, that is another big trend that we are starting to see in organizations, and teams are evolving, teams are learning and how to actually do that. And just lastly before we go, if I wanted to set up my team to be able to learn agile, what would you recommend we do as a starting point?
Look, there's three really simple things that you can do. First one is go to Google and Google Agile Manifesto. You've got to understand the basis of the values and principles that the bunch of developers came up with. And it is actually really enlightening when you look at it. Yes, it is software development based. However, the customer satisfaction, early testable and trials, and continuous improvement are key themes around it. So that's the first one I would recommend. The second thing I would recommend is you need to understand the flavor of Agile within your organization. So what are they doing? So Tony mentioned before, some organizations have multiple scrums. So they might be going for the safe or enterprise level deployment of Agile or usage of. So one thing that I would highly suggest is go and ask someone in the within the Agile team and say, look, what flavor or what are you doing at the moment to incorporate Agile within your practices? And the third and last thing is, I would say that you need to really understand the mechanics of how these teams deliver value and how quickly do they deliver value. Some sprints are about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Just understand the mechanisms and understand how your deliverable can continuously add value to them. Find those gaps and then you slot yourself in there. And go to some of the ceremonies. If they have a retro on Friday night, or whatever they do, go to a retro. If they do stand-up, go there and just listen in. Just get yourself immersed in it. I think most designers would say, well, the best thing to do is just do. So you just do. So just go out and just try it out. So that's 3 things that you can do.
Great. Thank you very much, guys. There are a few more questions. What we'll do is we'll get those answered for you through the panel members. We'll extract the information and have those answered for you. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you for volunteering your precious time, and thank you for being part of the very first 6-day countdown Asia Pacific panel. And just a reminder to our audience that the countdown of events and online panels are continuing on for the next 6 days. CXday.org is where you can get all the information. Thank you very much, and continue to celebrate customer experience, and also don't forget the big celebration on Tuesday the 3rd of October. Thank you very much, and thank you Anil, Tony and Sai. Have a good afternoon or evening. Bye everyone.
See you guys.